name is Isabel Kudel, and I'm the founder and managing partner of Moving On Professional Mobility. And as EuRA board member, I am thrilled to be your host for the day. This is a fascinating topic we're talking about, sustainability in corporate housing, a session that will be moderated by Andrew Scott and sponsored by Eden Group Soulful Hospitality. That was a fun video. While I really like their website opening with when you open their website, it goes this relaxing chirping of songbirds, and it really takes you into this green environment and sustainability and how they vouch for creativity and innovation and change and looking for better ways just to what to do and how to be in this world, because there is no planet B. And it takes courage, to accept accountability and to empower those around us and to demonstrate corporate social responsibility whilst really minimizing our environmental impact. So, what is environmental social governance? What is generically referred to as sustainability? What does it mean to my business? Particularly in the temporary housing market, where more and more clients are focusing on this subject matter. Well, in this session, we will look to explore what this means and how it impacts our clients' choices. Sustainable housing, in short, means organizing your offer in a way that it produces less waste, where we find more reuse, recycling, and together with lower life cycle environmental impacts and costs, better reliability, less maintenance, better user experience. So whilst the focus is put on the temporary housing side, all businesses need electricity, water, goods that are both consumable and durable, and all this also leads to the creation of waste. So sustainable hotel businesses that significantly reduce their environmental impact through green best practices in maintenance, services, logistics, products, supplies. The core elements revolve around reducing waste, saving energy, and cutting down on water usage. The corporates that use such sustainable technology get the green building labels, which are a clear choice consumers are making, including across the mobility space. So now that's it from me and my passion for sustainability. Let's discuss its potential impact and what businesses are doing to add more value in this area. I am handing over to Andrew Scott, Vice President Europe at WellWorks, recently served as EuRA President, and moderating this wonderful session to present our panelists. See you in a bit.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Yeah, and really kind of looking forward to exploring this subject a little more this afternoon or this morning or even this evening, dependent on where you're dialing in from. So without further ado, I would love to introduce this fantastic panel that we've got. I'm going to start with Jo Layton, whom many of you in the corporate housing industry will know Jo. If I say she's been around a long time, it's difficult to see that when she looks so young, but she's got an unbelievable amount of experience, incredibly well respected, and is very much a kind of a consultant within the industry, in part because of her knowledge, experience, and passion, and particularly passion for this subject as well. Jo is the owner and CEO of CAP Worldwide, and welcome, Jo.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Great to be here. Thank you.
And next, I'd like to introduce Nick Barton, who's the COO of Eden, And it is very much a coincidence. I mean, genuinely is a coincidence. I mean, it's fantastic that they're supporting EuRA, and thank you very much for that, Nick, but that he happens to be on the panel today. I mean, it's genuinely a coincidence, but I was really keen to try and carve out some time for Nick to join us, and I think we'll all kind of hear just a bit more about, you know, how Eden have been, you know, pretty much kind of spearheading sustainability or things around that subject within their organization. And for those of you, and I hope there probably aren't many who aren't familiar with Eden, they were formerly known as Seiko. So, you know, very well known, and obviously got a great brand and product. And after that little short video, I recommend you all kind of head to their website, not until we've finished this session, and just to see a little bit more about them. So thanks for joining us, Nick. And
Thanks,
next,
Andrew.
if I could introduce James Foyce, who I would say really doesn't need any introduction in this industry. Obviously, the CEO of the Association of Service Department Providers. And again, we're delighted, James, that you've joined us here today to give some further insight as to, you know, how you and your organisation and team are looking at this subject. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Vidak Glasnich, who is in fact a colleague of mine, and he heads up our supply chain in EMEA for our DwellWorks Living brand, and he's actually sat up in the control tower, as we call it. He's in kind of Central Europe, and he's sat up there kind of watching everything that's going on for us. And again, I'm delighted, you know, Vidak, that you've managed to kind of carve out some time to spend with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so, and I mean, Isabel, you gave a kind of a really good intro, but what I'm going to do is actually come to you, Joe, maybe just to kind of put a bit more kind of meat on the bones with regards to, you know, what is an ESG program. It's kind of things that I think some of us may have heard, and to some extent, I think people may have thought, well, kind of how relevant is that to me and is that to my business? And I think one of the things that I've seen and kind of learned over the last, 12, 18 months, and even more so now, it's going to become, I mean, more important to us all as good citizens of this planet. But in terms of, you know, what customers, clients' expectations are going to be. So
Absolutely.
If you're happy to give us a bit of an insight, Joe.
Of course. So, and it's great. Thank you for calling me an industry consultant. It's much better than a veteran, which is what I'm being called constantly, which does show my age a little bit more. So thank you for that. But I think it's really interesting. It's a fascinating subject, and it's something that is going to be on every agenda moving forward. We know that we're already in 2021 and there's lots of goals by 2030. But I think when we talk about ESG, I think it's important that we actually understand what those things actually mean. And I think there are probably a lot of people that are on the webinar today that are thinking, what is ESG? So firstly, if you don't mind, I'll just clarify that. Obviously, the E of ESG stands for environmental, which is about climate and sustainability, obviously. And then the S is for social, which includes our diversity, human rights, and things like consumer protection. And then you've got the what's really hitting all of us at the moment is G, which is the corporate governance and concerns that are hitting every single corporate boardroom table at the moment. So, and that's really looking at what C-suite or CEO behaviours are, right to accounting controls, right down to actions about diversity and inclusivity, and especially the sustainability side as well. So the purpose of these programmes is really, an ESG program is really about ensuring that corporates make better and more informed decisions. And one of those areas, which I'm sure Nick is going to go into more detail, and Vidak especially, is about the measurements of those programs, because if you don't measure it, it doesn't get done. And that's what's obviously become a priority now, is the measurement of what percentage you're going to be achieving over the next few years in achieving your net zero targets as such. So and the focus on the measurables actually helps people to understand if you've got any hidden risks inside your business, which you haven't thought about, but it also helps you think about new opportunities. And how you can, really develop and drive your businesses through those new opportunities to be greener. Does that help? Andrew.
No, that was great. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I just gone on mute because I've got a rather mental Springer Spaniel in the background, but you know, that's what happens with home living. So apologies to everyone if they hear some of that. And actually, Nick, I was going to come to you now, if I may, and you know, and as a high profile operator, operating in, you know, multiple buildings in multiple locations in multiple countries, I just wanted to understand, you know, what Eden has been doing with regards to a sustainability program. So I don't know whether you might be able to just share a little bit about that, and you know, maybe describe some of your key goals and how you kind of manage and administer such a program.
Yeah, for sure, Andrew. Thank you. Actually, before I do, I think I probably have a solution for your Springer Spaniel, actually, because on a slightly related note, one of the most popular discussions we've had in corporate RFPs for mobility in the last few months has actually been our pet policy. That I'm happy to clarify, Eden is very, very welcoming to your pets of any variety within reason. So interestingly, in terms of inclusivity, pets is very much on the agenda and has become part of the dialogue in the last few months. But yeah, listen, in terms of sustainability, you know, Eden certainly doesn't purport to have all the answers, but we have developed a program called our Biosphere, which is really a recognition that, you know, ESG covers really a very broad range of topics. But you know, from our point of view, as I guess one of the sort of the leading sort of service department operators and apart hotel operators across Europe now, has really come down to sort of three areas. Sort of one, construction, so how we build and develop projects. Second, operations, so actually how we run those buildings in a sustainable way. And thirdly, more broadly, sort of community. So to sort of touch on each very briefly, construction is reasonably straightforward in terms of measurement. There are really two main standards that operate. BREEAM is a UK standard of sustainable construction that looks at the extent to which the buildings are sustainably developed in terms of materiality, sustainability, solar, etc. And LEED is the same standard in Europe. And so from a construction point of view, we look to try and adhere to both of those sustainable construction standards. From an operations point of view, that really means a number of areas, but sort of energy consumption. So we've got a commitment to 100% green energy by the end of this year. Waste management, eliminating single-use plastics. So again, we've got a commitment to eliminate all consumable single-use plastics by the end of this year. Green sourcing and procurement. And the third area is really more broader, and Joe touched on it, around sort of community, and that really means for us inclusivity, which for us is really just starting to have a conversation in some ways about what it means to be an inclusive and sort of broad-reaching business these days. Modern slavery, well-being is very much on our agenda right now, and you know, whilst there are sort of metrics you can look at around diversity, our belief is to some extent that having a conversation about these things is the start point, and that's really what we're trying to agenda within the Eden business these days. So yes, the short answer, Andrew, is that, you know, we have a program that reflects both our construction, our operations, and our community, but we'll continue to evolve as some of these things, I suspect, will become table stakes, and new and different expectations will present themselves. Obviously, ultimately, carbon neutrality for us over the sort of 3 to 5 year period.
And Nick, with you know, the program that you're going through, and when I say that, and I'm not saying that kind of lightly, because it's more of a way of life, isn't it, I think, than you know, it's just something that we kind of seen that we need to do. But how have you managed to kind of align that with your kind of customers' expectations? I mean, do you hear, you know, much from them, what their kind of requirements are and
yeah,
expectations?
No, it's a great question, Andrew, and both through our agency partners and our relocation partners, as well as corporate clients directly. I guess the way we stay in touch primarily is through those RFP dialogues, where, you know, rightly many corporations are asking these questions of us in order to adhere to their own policies and that of their clients. So in some ways, it's the ongoing dialogue that allows us to sort of make these responses. And the pet policy, whilst is a small element of that, certainly reflects generally a desire to find somewhere that's sustainable over the long term and allows you to accommodate those sort of lifestyle needs. That's really more on the well-being side. But I would say in the last couple of years, we've seen a heightened awareness and certainly a much more robust set of requirements coming through mobility and corporate housing RFPs, and that's for us a really crucial way of staying in tune with what our clients and our agency partners expect of us.
Andrew, can I come in there as well and just to add, because Nick, I completely agree with you. It's what the corporates are looking for at the moment is that it's on their agenda, so it needs to be on ours. It's really a high agenda point. Whenever we're speaking to the global travel buyers, they're all saying, what are you doing about sustainability and diversity? So because it's on those boardroom tables, what my advice to everyone at the moment is make sure that you have started your credible plans and how you're going to hit those goals and targets and what policies you're going to put in place to deliver them, because you might not be delivering them now, but there's, you know, the advice is that you can start having those conversations now, because it is a major topic for especially, I think the FTSE 100 companies in the UK are on a race to zero, so they want to get there faster than what they're supposed to, and they're going to be looking for their second tier suppliers to be achieving that target with them. So completely agree with you, Nick, 100%.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, no, great answers. Thank you for providing that, you know, further insight. And James, I'm going to come to you. And I know we've had, you know, several kind of conversations on this topic. So I'm just wondering if you could, you know, bring us up to speed with regard to ASAP. And then I know there's obviously been some kind of involvement, or quite a bit of involvement historically with ISAP, you know, on the accreditation side. But yeah, it would just be interesting, as I think everybody would be, just to, you know, kind of hear what your thoughts and the organisation's thoughts are.
Well, thanks, Andrew. And it is fascinating, this subject, isn't it? I was just going to recap 20 odd years ago, I used to work for Virgin Atlantic. I think at that point it was a competitive opportunity whereby Richard put one of the cabin crew members in a green uniform and sent them out in front of the PR machine that was to try and promote a competitive advantage for sustainability. But 20 odd years on, I think we're in a really interesting position now, certainly within our part of the ecosystem, the accommodation ecosystem. And with regards to ASAP and ISAP, can I just put that into context at the moment? So the association introduced a number of accreditation products, probably 9.5 years ago now, and we branded them as ISAP. And as these have developed and grown, it's become clear to us over the last couple of years that the objectives for both entities were sort of pulling at each other. So almost a conflict of interest, whereby the ASAP was trying to promote the importance of a suite of accreditation products. But when it was delivering its own, the argument that it was putting forward was almost flawed from that respect. So we're in the process of an RFP ourselves, which is quite unusual, and we've sought expressions of interests for organisations that operate accreditation vehicles at the moment. So we're some way down that road in terms of the ISAP perspective. But just to get back to your question, if I can, I think it's absolutely fantastic. So we're always talking to members about understanding of sustainability and expectations for what the corporate might be wanting. And I think from our perspective, there is a huge breadth of understanding, acknowledgement, acceptance as much as anything for what is achievable. And I've had conversations with organizations that simply respond by saying, well, we can't recycle stuff within the serviced apartment industry. So we've got a really interesting opportunity to bring the sector together here. And just hearing colleagues on the panel talking about how far they're going to bridge the gap between understanding, expectation, demand, and what can reasonably be achieved, I think is really very important for us to understand. And I think much of the effort that we're going to is about supporting sustainability within the service department sector and working with organizations that offer a breadth of understanding, expertise within accreditation elements of sustainability. And part of what we're doing as we make ISAP independent is partnering with other accreditation organisations such as Green Tourism, which many of you will know at the moment, will become a collaborative accreditation partner for the association and are advisors within this journey that we're going down. So it's quite an exciting time for us. I think it's the coming of age in many respects of what we're doing, but it's certainly recognition that we now need to push forward collectively as a sector.
Okay, so more to come, and continually more to come, I guess, on the subject from ASAP.
Loads more.
Yeah, and just, you know, out of interest, James, what are you kind of hearing from, you know, your members, which, you know, obviously, you know, reach kind of far and wide, both, you know, in coverage, but also in, you know, size of members, you know, from you know, big organizations, you know, such as NICS, you know, where they got multiple sites, locations, buildings, etc., to, you know, the smaller, more local operators. What are you
I think, you know, much of what we've heard continually, the last 16 months have been phenomenal for us all, haven't they? And I think could we possibly have predicted anything like this? Well, Bill Gates may have done, but I'm not sure many of us could have done in the sector. So it's really understanding what it is that's going to kickstart that travel and the confidence again, whether it's relocation or whether it's corporates. It's understanding the trigger points that are coming through the RFPs and the discussion points. And as the panel have said, I agree with them, certainly. Those conversations around mental wellness, of course, it's Mental Wellness Week this week, sustainability, corporate governance, and safety and due diligence have come to the fore in equal measures, I think. And for us, you know, that's much of the work that ASAP has been doing over the last 9-10, well, from its conception, really. So I think it's recognition that this sector that we represent is really coming of age from that perspective.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, if I can build on that, James, just very briefly, I think probably all of us have seen a renewed interest in the service department, the apart hotel sector over the course of the pandemic. I mean, the very nature of a sort of self-contained, semi-autonomous space, I think talks very much to the needs of the contemporary traveller and frankly a concern amongst many large blue chip corporations about wellness and well-being of their employees at a level possibly that they hadn't had before. So I think to James's point, it makes this sector for many corporations that have corporate housing and, you know, extended stay needs far more relevant. I think and the opportunity with James and ASAP to unify the industry behind a set of standards, be they health and safety or broader around ESG is exciting. I think it is a coming of age, James. I completely agree with you.
Great. No, thank you, Nick. And Vivek, I'm going to come to you now, if I may. And, you know, Dwellworth's Living, you know, like other global corporate housing, you know, solution organizations, you know, work with thousands of suppliers, you know, some who own their buildings, you know, similar to Nick's organization, others who own and manage inventory, some who just match leases on demand, you know, and in this, you know, complex ecosystem, you know, what do you see as the kind of the core competencies that you think can reasonably ask of operators, you know, of all levels, because obviously trying to ensure there's some level of consistency, you know, and it's compliant, and how can it be tracked? I just, you know, would value your kind of thoughts, because you're obviously talking to operators day in, day out.
Sure. Well, first I'll kind of clarify what I think our role is as a platform in the middle, communicating to both suppliers and corporate clients. We have to ensure that that our suppliers know that this is now becoming a critical decision-making criteria for our clients. So, you know, travel and relocation are visible carbon-heavy expenses. So, you know, responsible actions in these and other areas of good corporate citizenship are expected. I think, obviously, on the other side of the platform, we owe it to our partners, our suppliers, to provide manageable method to demonstrate their commitment to clients. So that's why we're. we're currently talking to James and ASAP, Buyers Forum in particular, about an industry-wide credentialing standard. So that criteria is actually work in progress. Generally speaking, the idea is to define a baseline of sustainable performance that any corporate housing provider could work towards, and of course supplement where they saw value. We'd like to work towards like a certified sustainable practices badge that suppliers can earn at a reasonable cost of investment, and clients can see as an option on property choices presented. So we as we kind of build towards streamlined standard for both good governance and a controlled cost for our partners and our clients, we're in process of surveying our high volume partners, the likes of Eden, to learn what sustainable practices they have in place currently, and use the current state as a way to benchmark ourselves to a minimum viable product for the global standard. That's the kind of where we are now.
Okay, no, thank you. And just, out of interest, what's the kind of the mindset are you seeing from operators? I mean, obviously, Nick's kind of shared where they are and what they've been doing.
Yeah.
But they're at kind of one end of the spectrum compared
exactly.
to
the level of awareness and commitment vary greatly from the likes of Eden and CUP Worldwide, who has obviously made quite a progress in both defining their internal policy and actually specifically outlining the good practices and methods that make their businesses more sustainable, to those who are yet at the stage of having to recognize that there is a better way of operating and being a better corporate citizen. That's not through obviously a lack of interest, just smaller organizations with less resources, or operating in the markets where the general awareness of sustainability hasn't quite reached yet. But the spectrum is quite wide.
Okay, yeah, and again, it's part of a journey, isn't it? I guess, and that
Exactly.
we're kind of some are further advanced than others, but as long as everybody's kind of on it, which I think coming back to what you said, Joe, wasn't it? Is actually when people probably look inside their shops, so to speak, there probably is a lot that they can do. And what one organization can and needs to do might be different to another.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I think what's really interesting here, and it's great that Eden and like-minded companies, potentially Fraser's, Ascot, the ones that are really leading the charge, because they're so embedded into property, etc. These large operators are going to be looking at decarbonising their emissions at a far higher level than some of the smaller operators that maybe have got small buildings and can't always control how the energy is arriving to the building as such. So I think what's quite interesting for us really is achieving net zero is the goal, but corporates and CAP will be asking whether operators are moving to renewable energy in future. And I'm sure, Vidak, it's going to be one of the questions on your list of, right, okay, what kind of energy have you got? Can you change it? That's going to become a qualifying question to most operators, I'm positive, over the next 3 years especially. But I think if you really break it down, and I'm very good at very simple stuff, Andrew, I'm not very good at the technical hard stuff. So I'm going to say to you, from my perspective, being a small company, we're going to be ahead of the curve because we were created in 2019. So it's easier to be greener when you're a bit young and trendy, which is, I'm not young and trendy, but the company is. So really, it's about starting planning now for me. That's the whole idea, is get your plans out, start engaging the workforce. And I tell you what, the people that are under 35, 40 are so hot on this topic. We're catching up. but they're asking those questions before they go for jobs at the moment. You know, how sustainable is this company I'm about to join? So start engaging that brilliant workforce that's out there. They're going to make a difference, a much faster difference than what, you know, the small senior teams are. And think about changing habits. I don't know if everyone's talking about COP26 or talking about the G7 in Cornwall in June. Getting those subjects around the table at every level is really important. It affects all of us. There's not one person that sustainability doesn't impact eventually. And I have to tell you, this is so funny, James. You mentioned about Virgin and the green suits. I actually call our team Green Guardians. They're the Cap Earth Green Guardians. They haven't quite received their green lycra suits yet, but I think that's going to be really interesting when they do, and we'll make sure there's a photographer available for that. But actually just engaging and making it fun is going to be really important now, because it's such a dry subject. So, you know, as green as we can make it is as fun as we can make it as well. But 4 questions we asked when we set out our boardroom table, Andrew, which really hit home to us was, first of all, what can we control? Because that's a simple question. And if we can't control it, we can't worry about it yet. We can start making moves to it, but we can't control it. What are the gaps? What's out of our control? And what are we trying to do? And what are we trying to achieve? Because if you go too big and too wide too fast, you're never going to get started on anything. So we've come down to a really simple process inside our business. And one of them is assessing, Vidak, exactly what you're saying, assessing our contracts with our suppliers and starting to measure that. So we can put, our system, our digital ecosystem measures diversity, but now it's starting to measure sustainability as well. So technology is going to be a great new opportunity for everybody. And finally, absolutely, just low-hanging fruit, technology products. Buy energy saving technology products. It's so simple. You've got to look for the star. Reduce unnecessary travel. We've been doing, Vidak, which I'm sure you're doing as well, is we're doing virtual tours. We're changing our vehicles over to electric, no single-use plastics, going paperless, reviewing all our policies. And then we have to leave the really big things up to Nick and the Edens and the Ascots of this world, because they're the ones going to make the 40% differences. But we can make a much bigger difference in our own companies. But it's actually keeping it simple and actually just getting started. But it's like I'm doing a couch to 5K, but that first run was the hardest one I'm ever going to do. So, you know, it's about doing that first, getting yourself across that line and just getting started and actually not being afraid of it, because it's not that scary. It's not that scary.
Yeah.
No.
No, I think it's an interesting point, Joe. And just to pick up, you know, one of those topics, let's take, you know, the reduction of single-use plastics. With some of these measures, there is also a very commercial reason for doing that, right? So if you think about single-use plastics, toiletries, shampoos, conditioners, all that kind of stuff, there is a commercial reason to have refillables as opposed to single-use after about the first 6 months. So not only are some of these measures clearly accretive in terms of sort of sustainability, they also can make quite a lot of sense commercially as well. And actually, you can very often find you can get a better product for the guest and for the traveller if you do move to larger format. Refillables as one small, but you know, possible example that pretty much every operator can have a think about and probably will be able to tick a box. Do something good and positive, but also probably find a commercial benefit. And that's true of not all, but certainly some of the measures that we've been speaking about today.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of share one, well, I think it's quite an interesting fact, and it was just coming back to, you know, you'd mentioned, you know, about the, you know, the governmental summit that's happening in Cornwall, which is literally not too many miles from where I'm sat currently, and obviously the hotel that is hosting that, you know, is a really nice hotel. It's sat on the edge of one of the beautiful beaches down here, but you know, that's had a huge focus on you know, its sustainability and its, you know, impact on you know, local environment, etc. And what I thought was interesting yesterday, my wife was just showing me, you know, if we wanted to stay there any week the month after that event, which I think takes place the end of June, I think it is, their price is £14,500 a week, whereas it was probably about 1,500 quid prior. But just shows there could be a commercial benefit to as to what Nick was saying. But anyway.
Well, Andrew, we're housing actually a lot of the support workers around there, and I tell you, the accommodation there, it's not costing that amount for the accommodation that we've booked. I promise you.
But anyway, I'm just going to stay with you actually, Nick, if I may, and you know, as a kind of also a leader in, you know, the hospitality industry, I'm kind of sure you see this trend in the hotel business as well. So, you know, we've seen global brands like, you know, Hilton publishing results on greenhouse gas emissions, you know, reductions, sustainable water conservation, etc. And it looks like we've kind of come a long way from, you know, the card on the door which said, you know, do you want your towels, you know, do you want to use them for the second day, or, you know, there's a free bottle of water, or you know, a soft drink, you know, if you don't have any cleaning. But I'm just kind of wondering what you're kind of seeing, because I guess a lot of that is driven, you know, by the customer as well as, you know, as in what their expectations are. But just to see what you're seeing.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Andrew. And yeah, this is not a new topic. I spent quite a lot of my career in more traditional hotels and hospitality, so it's certainly not a new topic. Although I think sort of the broader concept of ESG, I think probably is a more recent narrative, and certainly a broader way of thinking about sustainability. Yeah, I think some of the trends are very much driven by, you know, demographics, and I think Joe spoke about it a bit earlier, and James as well. You know, both our staff and our talent within the organization, and very often our travelers, are demanding us to sort of act on this, right? And there is a generational gap, I think, which is the reality for many of us. And I consider myself maybe kind of in the veteran category like Joe a little bit. I've been around a bit, but, you know, in a way that never before, I think stakeholders are talking about this, and not just giving it lip service, but, you know, it's genuinely part of their DNA. And so I think that, you know, the direction of travel for this is that it will have to become part of an organization's sort of DNA as well. So that there will be, obviously, if you look at, you know, construction or operations or green standards certification, a level of table stakes, you know, things that you will have to do as an operator, as an agent, as a service provider in this space, just to be considered. Because if you don't, you'll be off the list. And so there's certainly a table stake in this. But I think if it doesn't become part of your DNA as an organization, then you'll just become very less relevant to stakeholders. And certainly if I think about my kids and, you know, Gen Ys and millennials, you know, this stuff is on the radar and it's part of their buying decisions. So that, I think, is really what's driving change. And so if I think beyond, you know, some of the topics you've already spoken about, things that I think are going to become more important over the next sort of 2 to 3 years, sustainable tourism for sure. You know, we've already seen local planning authorities rail against Airbnb and the sort of rental sector to some extent for over tourism and the impact that's going to have. I think you're going to see more of that. So sustainable tourism, I think, is going to very much come into focus, and what operators are doing to support that and support local sort of planning and authorities. I genuinely think well-being, mental health and well-being is going to be huge. It already is. It's being spoken about obviously a lot this week particularly, and I think it's real, and I think it's healthy, and I think traveling is a lonely business, and placing talent, global talent, into a city and leaving them to it is not an answer anymore. I think you have to assimilate your talent into cities, and I think you have to think really hard about not only the product and the price, but also the environment that you're placing travelers into. And then I think finally, I think this is going to become far more transparent. I think James was talking earlier about certification and reviews. I think as well as star ratings and reviews, I think, you know, guests are going to want to see what your credentials are, and that is going to become far more transparent in a way that guest reviews and sharing experiences is today. So this is not a flash in the pan. ESG is not a thing that will go away in a few years' time. It's very much here to stay. It's driven by demographics. It's driven by a younger generation that's far more motivated about this, and it behoves veterans like myself and Joe to make sure that we lead our organisations to do something about it and be very serious and make it part of our DNA.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm just wondering, James, is anything further you'd like to kind of add, from, I guess, an association, and also, seeing and hearing, so much about what's happening in the industry?
Well, I think following Nick, I mean, it's always difficult to do that, Nick, because you're so well understanding of the situation, the subject matter here. But for those that haven't had a chance to listen to it, the Queen's speech was released just, I think, an hour or so ago, and she has referenced the environmental bill. So this is Her Majesty the Queen, and she's putting, or they're saying that they're putting the environment at the centre of policy making, making government accountable for making progress on environmental issues. This is the first time that Her Majesty's made reference to it at all, which I think is really interesting in this context. And she's talking about a framework for legally binding environmental targets, introducing measures to revolutionise how we recycle. So this is really a step change, isn't it, in much of what we're seeing. And I think these opportunities to speak collaboratively and work together and help raise the profile are so important in understanding what opportunities there are. But I did say, and here's the reality check, I think, from my perspective, because I did read a report quite recently, which was alarming. And I think without understanding the breadth of the opportunities ahead of us, we have to exercise some caution, all of us, and at least understand what we're saying. Because I read an article which was focusing on used cooking oil. It sounds an interesting subject to talk about here, but what it's done, used cooking oil, of course, many fast food chains and fast food restaurants are using their own cooking oil, which has been filtrated and used for powering their vehicles. And as it's classed as a waste product here in the UK, they can get, I think it's double carbon credits for using it, which is fantastic. However, and here's the downside, what that's done is increase the value of what is UCO, used cooking oil, which has now become the greatest export of oil products from Asia. And what that's done, or secondary oil use, but what that's done is driven the price up, and therefore crude, virgin oils such as palm oil have become less expensive and have been blamed, if you like, or used for accelerating deforestations in certain area of Asia. So I think we just need to take care and understand what it is we're trying to do. And I think small efforts are really important, but we need to understand the impact of what we're trying to do and why. And these conversations we're having collectively, the collaborations we're having collectively is raising those profiles and understanding of it. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm just going to kind of switch tack slightly and come to you, Vidak, and in part because I know you unfortunately have got to leave us just before the top of the hour. So I want to make sure that we get our money's worth out of you, so to speak. So, and I think we'd shared that obviously you're, a supply chain lead, which is managing a complex, global supply chain. And I'm just kind of wondering, with regards to all the, kind of plethora of, issues, critical criteria, etc., that, you as a leader of that supply chain require from operators. I'm just wondering what do you, and particularly around the subject we're talking about, what do you see, as being kind of the key drivers or the key changes that may happen over the next few months? I mean, is there anything in particular, and given what's been going on with COVID, but as I don't know, and I have said this before, but hopefully, we are going to start to see, the end of the tunnel, maybe at different times for different countries, which has different impacts, but just would value your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Now, as as the things are starting to look more positive and as the world starts traveling again, now that we all learn how to wash our hands properly, I think our clients will continue to have high expectations of sanitation and hygiene protocols. I think even once we all, or majority of us, are vaccinated and we start, meeting in public places and traveling on roads, we expect our guests will still value diligence and vigilance in their immediate environment. And I expect corporate housing to continue to be an attractive option versus conventional hotels. To Nick's points earlier, the spaces are bigger, more private, with less traffic, and typically at lower cost. So for safety-minded traveler, for people traveling with families while transitioning to permanent housing, and for those with a high degree of expecting high degree of health security, corporate housing will remain highly desirable. Additional thing that I kind of we start noticing is moving from curing what was negative, protecting against the virus, to leading with more positive, the whole concept of duty to care and well-being. So those smart sanitation practices can now morph into healthy living practices. Again, to your point, Nick, earlier, where whether it's like a healthier fridge stocking or healthy living exercise classes offered in public areas, more environmentally sensitive lighting and furnishing, etc. And including expanded capability as a service solution, which is expected to provide clients with location on-demand information for their traveling associates. No company will want to be left again wondering where their people are and how to get them mobilized. That's a kind of system of support we plan to make sure is a key deliverable to clients, regardless of location of their people. And I think lastly, we know that people want to be aware of their circumstances, where the nearest stores, pharmacies, hospitals. In the past, staying in corporate housing, there was assumption that you'd get acclimatized on your own. But we acknowledge now that as a providers of care, not just housing, that people want a more complete orientation on their surroundings. And for us specifically, as a global destination service provider, this is kind of natural adaptation. We have local knowledge and local experts in thousands of locations, and our expanded duty of care will extend from physical surroundings to knowledge resources to provide guests with that increased sense of well-being and connection.
Okay, no, that's great, Didak, and I'm glad you're kind of sat in the control tower, kind of looking after that for us. So, and I'm just going to kind of switch things back to you, Joe, if I may. And if you said no, I don't know what I would say then. But anyway, I'm sure you'll take this one. And it's really, I mean, there's obviously a lot of things that are important when we're kind of looking after customers, but the whole customer experience. And again, I know this is something everyone's passionate about. We kind of see it in in bucket loads as well. So, I mean, what do you see as the expectation, of customers, guests, regarding the sustainable solution? What do you think, we're going to see? Well, what are we seeing, and what do you think we're going to see in the coming weeks, months, years?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good question, actually, and quite a challenging one, isn't it? Because really, what's happening in plan is at the moment is everyone's going to get into planning now, and we're really hoping that even after this, even if we've just encouraged 5 or 6 more companies to sit down and start thinking about their sustainability opportunities, that's and don't look at it as a challenge, look at it as an opportunity to begin with. The challenges come a couple of years down the line when you can't make certain changes because they're out of your control. But from my perspective, it's about now, the expectation from customers is that you are in at least a low-hanging fruit handled mode. So what you can do that's easy, start doing it now and start showing that. That's the customers are expecting that, and the customer expectation is always at the forefront of any of our services. I think the second thing is plan to be net zero and tell people when you're going to do it, and use social media, you know, create that social awareness, show that we as an industry are at the forefront of this. Let's not wait to catch up. Let's be a spearhead in this, because it's a lot easier for us. We are a pretty green organisation because we don't have a lot of public areas in many of our apartments, and people can turn their lights off. You know, we can help people to be greener, definitely. But I also think there's something that's happening at the moment, and it was kind of like an easy route for me last year. We started to say, right, okay, we can reduce, but actually we can write off. And writing off our emissions seemed like a really easy thing to do. We planted 300 trees and we felt really good. But the problem is that eventually, if everyone doesn't start reducing instead of writing off, that's going to be a major issue, because there's not enough earth for the number of trees that we'll all have to start planting if we don't get in control of this. So from my perspective, this is about making sure that we collaborate, we create great partnerships, that the industry leaders actually start educating and start helping people to become, you know, the greenest they can be. And the win-win that we've got at the moment, I absolutely believe, is that the younger generations are engaged, and they're normally the hardest ones to get off the sofas. So let's be honest, if they're already up and running around and trying to do this right, us, you know, baby boomers and those ones that have always working all the hours God sends, surely this is going to be a better road for us to, it's already trodden by our youth. So my advice, think about and be ready to adapt, engage in issues, start small, work up, and absolutely translate your awareness into local actions in your community, because then the community starts to get behind you as a green goddess or guardian, whatever you want to be. So yeah, I think definitely it's bringing it back to the customer service. Customers will walk to you if they believe that you've got the right services and the right customer service, and definitely the right green credentials.
Okay, no, brilliant. Thank you. And I'm sure everyone was kind of listening to that, because there's, you know, a lot of great takeaways for folks. And Nick, just, you know, jumping to you, and obviously, you know, it's been great to hear what you've shared about, you know, what you and your organization have been doing. And, you know, you kind of started this journey some time ago. But I mean, just to, I guess for, you know, for the audience, just to get an idea of kind of what are you thinking, and, you know, that you're going to do and your organization is going to be doing over the next 60, 90, 120 days. Just, it might just kind of help people think, you know, how you're thinking and developing this plan, and whether there's anything in particular to share.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Andrew. So I think, you know, very practically, our goals this year, I think I shared earlier, is to move to 100% green energy by the end of the year. So that's a big focus. Eliminate that single-use plastic. That's a focus for this year. In terms of sort of building, we're currently getting ready to open a new building in Cambridge. We're working quite closely with the university. 80% of the roof of that building will have solar panels on it. So you know, that's very here and now. That's a very real world stuff that's happening in Eden at the moment. I suppose the other thing we're doing is trying to think very hard about community. So, you know, Lock is our sort of lifestyle apart hotel brand. We currently operate in London, Manchester, Edinburgh, and now Dublin and Munich as well. So that's expanding its footprint quite rapidly. That is a very community-driven brand. And as we open and launch those buildings, we're trying to really do it in a way that starts with the community. And in very many cases, what we're trying to do is find ways to bring young, local talent into those buildings and make them part of it. Wellness and well-being is one of our pillars of that brand. And so that's quite intrinsic in the way that we try and open our buildings. So if you go to Munich now, if you go to Dublin now, you spend time in our buildings, you know, you'll see that dialogue. You'll see us talking about talent. You'll see us talking about well-being and wellness, and those things are very much at the heart and soul of kind of Lock as a sort of contemporary apart hotel operation. So yeah, exciting things happening. I'm particularly excited about Cambridge. I'm yet to see that building come to life. We opened that in September, but yeah, 80% of the roof in solar panels, I think, is a good place to start.
Okay, no, great. Thanks very much. And James, coming at it from, you know, a slightly different perspective, you just wondered kind of what's on your, priority list for the next, few months? Anything you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting. I picked up on something Vidak said, and he said we have a duty to care. And I think that's fantastic and speaks volumes that we all do. We have a duty to care. And of course, what we need to do as an industry is differentiate our organizations and the organizations. And we talk about accreditation, we talk about the types of accreditation, we talk about the value that they can bring. So collaborative partnerships we're working on. We're bringing together, as I've said, a partnership with Green Tourism. We're working with other organizations that also offer advice, specialist consultancy, carbon offsetting programs. And it's just things, I'm very uneducated when it comes to sustainability. We talked to Joe, we talked about the green goddess that was on board Virgin Aircraft all those years ago, and how things have changed and how the industry is kick-starting itself. So it's about trying to be the catalyst. If ASAP can do that in any way and bring together those dialogues through the Buyers Forum that we've got, or the relationships that we're developing with other trade associations in different markets around the world, and really aligning our efforts with their aspirations to bring together this ecosystem of travel and make sure that organizations know that those that fit within it, that we represent, that we all collectively work with, are doing a really super job in every element of what they possibly can be, and that's our aspiration.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. Thank you. And I'm going to just go to some questions. So I'm going to multitask here, which will be a bit of a novelty. So we've had a few questions in, and there's one here which I think you kind of covered off, Nick, anyway, which was, will ESG performance be a key competitive advantage to organizations in attracting and engaging today's employees, including mobile talent, as well as retaining talent in the future? I think we've kind of think.
Yeah, listen, I think I think maybe in the short term it will be a competitive advantage. I hope it won't be over the long term, because it needs to become DNA. It needs to become sort of heart and soul of all organizations. But no, certainly if I look at Eden's own experience, and obviously we've been fortunate to be supported to grow as opposed to sort of contract over this period. And a lot of the talent that we see joining Eden, and we talked about the sort of the website and the sort of the idea of Eden and social hospitality earlier. It has been because they come for the purpose of the organization and the raison d'etre of the organization as much as the job they do. And I think, purpose-led organizations are going to be attractive to the contemporary workforce. And again, I think it's important that we sort of recognize that the value systems of today's younger generation of talent is quite different potentially than some of ours, and James mentioned it. So yeah, in the short term, yes. In the long term, I really hope not, because I hope this is part of all organizations' sort of DNA going forward. It needs to be.
And I've got another question here, which I'm going to come to both you and Joe on, and don't take offense, James, but I think when I've read it out, you might realize why I'm not asking you. But and it talks about apps such as Impact Score companies on things like carbon emissions, gender pay gap, paying the real living wage, amongst others. I mean, and I think there are various other mechanisms out there, and I just wondered, well, and the folks who are asking the question here is, how do you as organizations feel about that? What impact do you think those kind of mediums have on recruitment and selection?
Do you want to go, Joe?
Yeah, I think that's a challenging one. Yeah, I think anything that's in social media now is something that you've got to be extremely highly aware of, and anything that can be noted about your governance, because that's really about your governance, isn't it? It's about how you're managing. It's about your ethics of your company. It's about your corporate behaviour is actually out and being measured by everybody anyway. So I do think that, I do believe that when people are now looking to be employed, the questions that they're asking are going to go down those routes, and there will be, like you say, apps or measurements because what gets measured gets done. So therefore, once people see that they get a low score, they'll start to concentrate on that. And if it does start having an impact, I do definitely think this is the way people are measuring now, is through performance targets, etc. on apps.
And Nick, any kind of comments from your point of view?
Yeah, conscious of time as well, and the clock's ticking. So in a word, yes, I think I mentioned earlier, I think transparency of compliance or performance on some of these metrics, some of these areas is going to become the norm. We're obliged, actually, by virtue of our ownership, to report on a number of dimensions of ESG under a program called EuRA, which is really a way of starting to provide some transparency. But I think putting this up in the public domain is the next natural step.
Okay, and I'm conscious of time, but I think we're allowed another minute or two. So there's one kind of question that I want to ask you all. It's not necessarily ESG related, but I think I think the audience would be interested, and I certainly am, because the last 14, 15, 16 months have been like no other. I think for everyone on this planet. But in terms of managing and navigating businesses and organizations, if someone had have said, at the kind of end of 2019, this is what's going to happen, but everyone's got through it. We're all kind of healthy, still here, still employing people. But I just wondered if you could give me maybe one or two real lessons that you've learned over the last year or two. So Joe, anything?
My biggest lesson probably is learn to sleep better. Just because I'm a terrible sleeper. But really, on a serious note, I think for us it was about staying agile, being able to adapt really quickly. Expect the unexpected, because we became extremely busy last year because we were fortunate and we were handling a major contract, but we had to handle that contract and we had to be able to step up and perform. So for us, it was about evolving and pivoting really quickly, and actually working in fantastic partnerships. We're only as good as the people that we book our travellers into. We're an agent, we're a middleman, you can call us whatever you like, but at the end of the day, we are reliant on supply and partners. So from my perspective, it's all about partnerships. Last year was about partnerships, and I'm guessing that's going to be for the next 10 years for us.
Okay. And James?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Agile. I mean, nobody could have predicted what we were about to live through over the last sort of 16 months. And I think the lesson we've all learnt within the association, and therefore the organisations that we represent, is listening to what our customers are saying. And we were able to do that. We had no choice. We had to work very quickly. Joe talked about being nimble in those sorts of environments, and I would agree. There are some opportunities that we're hearing. Just a year ago, we were talking about existence. Now we're talking about ESG and mental well-being and other key decision makers in kickstarting travel. So we've moved on from where we were a year ago, and that's because I think the agility, the ability to be able to listen to what's going on and adapt accordingly, and that is what our sector can do incredibly well.
Yeah. And Nick, just coming to you, and I know you're kind of sat and it's kind of slightly dark, so we can't see you particularly well, but when I saw you the other day, I mean, I noticed you hadn't got any more grey hair, or you had any grey hair as far as I could, and there were no more wrinkles, yet, managing such a big organization, and all the different buildings and all the consequences that go with that. I'm really interested to hear what
nice. And sorry guys, I'm broadcasting from the glamorous surroundings of WeWorkers. So we are between offices in Soho and Bermondsey. So we're in a cupboard in WeWork in Shoreditch right now, hence the slightly dark and gloomy surroundings, but the grey has gone. I'm certainly feeling younger than I ever have. No, listen, I mean, I think resilience, James, you spoke about it, and I think what we have learned is this product category, this part of hospitality, has been more resilient than pretty much any other aspect of the travel industry, and that's good for us. It's good for our teams. It's good for our people. It's generated hope, and I think it's got a lot of us through. That if I compare an industry that I used to be in, which is more traditional mainstream hotels, that's had a really horrid time and regrettably has lost extraordinary number of jobs over this last year. The service departments and the hotel sector has come through this extraordinarily positively. I mean, we ran at, I don't know, average 65% occupancies last year, despite everything, and that reflects the fact that this product has got appeal to very many types of guests, whether they're staying for a day or a week or a month or a year or longer, because it's autonomous and it's self-contained. So a one level resilience of this sector has I think built a lot of strength for the future. How do you manage an organization through this period? I think we probably learned that you can never communicate enough. Communicating through the new means of Teams or Zoom or whatever we found has certainly helped us. It isn't a panacea. We've also learned that being apart from each other and not being proximate in the same place and physically together has been a huge challenge in many ways, and we're desperate, as many of you will be, to get together and get back to work and get back to offices. But certainly we've sort of learned sort of how to communicate, and communication has been key through this period. And I think we've probably also learned just to be quite honest about how we're feeling, and if you call that well-being or sort of mental health, you can if you like, but we've tried to be very honest with ourselves, with our teams, about where we're all at, and not sort of put any masks up and hide from what has been the most traumatic period for hospitality in the history of ever. And I think just really trying to take that sort of spirit of honesty and to some extent caring about well-being and having the conversations about it and not being afraid to do that has been important to us over this period as well. So yeah, many lessons, but I guess those are some of the highlights.
Okay, no, and thank you, and echo many of those sentiments. And we're definitely kind of at our time out, so to speak. And I can't thank you enough. I mean, one, because I was kind of just like hearing what you've all got to say. I hope for everybody out there, they found it, useful and insightful. And I think going back to what you said, Joe, if there's some small takeaways, hopefully there are some takeaways, even if they're not in single-use plastic takeaways, but whatever it is, I hope people have found this useful. And again, thank you to you all for giving up your time. So, and I think we're going to go back to Isabel now. So
thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this, raising this. It's such an important question of being kind to nature. If we've been here, well, EuRA has been here for 20 years. And if we want the next 20 to be just as good, well, we do have to leave a nice and eco-friendly and safe planet for the future generations. It was clear from the conversation that consumers are also preferring sustainable brands. The travel industry is taking note of this. But as individuals, we also need to do this at home. So then when we travel, it sounds natural that we are looking after each other and being kind to our planet. And when I say being kind to our planet, that brings me to our next Ignite speaker, who takes a deep dive into the importance of being kind. So please welcome the head of Global Account Management at Q Apartments, Lorna Keen.
Have you experienced an oh my God moment? I have. My clothes were inside out. Can you imagine? I was shy, awkward at 17 in a pub with friends. Just thinking about a visit to the loo freaked me out. It was a terrifying walk for me. From the bar to the loo, I felt the whole place was looking at me. Returning, I realised my dress was tucked in my knickers. The embarrassment overwhelmed me. Have you had that type of experience? That was in the 1970s. And that was intense memory came back to me recently during a conversation where I was introduced to Inside Out Day. Have you heard of it? Hearing about Inside Day triggered an investigation. The UK founded Mental Health Awareness Week 21 years ago, and recently Inside Out Day became an official event that week, created to encourage youngsters to wear an item of clothing inside out. This was adopted by 300 schools. What was its purpose? Well, to raise awareness of the importance of being kind to others, because it's impossible to know how someone is feeling at any given time, and expressing kindness to others will make a huge difference to how they feel. In 2015, Mental Health Week expanded the focus on children, and on the 3rd of February 2020 became the official Inside Out Day, encouraging youngsters to appear differently by wearing their clothing inside out. It acts as a cue to be kind. Inside Out was founded by 3 sisters in memory of their sister Jenny, second left in the picture. Jenny suffered mental health issues and tragically took her life. How she looked on the outside was very different on the inside. Their goal, to raise awareness of the importance of kindness with a focus on children early in their development stage. I imagine if at age 17 I had been fragile, my negative moment one step too many, life could have been different. Today, we understand that mental health disorders can affect many. Sadly, this number is growing. Did you know that the UK government reported that 3/4 of lifelong health issues start before the age of 25? Sadly, some children today will suffer more compared to previous generations. The sisters' tragedy ignited a drive to stop suffering. Their aim is to help youngsters to see that appearances can be deceiving, as Jenny was beautiful and suffered badly on the inside. The introduction to Inside Out Day and my need to find a topic for another presentation led me to explore children's mental health in the 1970s, and I found this headline from an article written by Dr. Saul Harrison. The report stated a tragic lack of unified commitment to the mental health of children and that there is a crisis in child mental health. That 500-page report was addressed to the Congress of the United States of America. Fast forward to 2020, it's heart-wrenching to read that 16% of 5 to 16-year-olds have a possible mental health disorder. This is an increase from 11% in 2017. Inside Out Days to be really needed. The sisters heard other stories of tragedy and loss of lives and wanted to do something to help. Did you know that suicide rates in people from 10 to 24 years of age has increased 57% from 2007 to 2018? How can we help? Social media shows people having a wonderful time, and the opposite may be true. Inside Out Day aims to show children that it's okay to not be okay and encourage them to talk and seek help. Will you commit to the kindness cause? Can I challenge you to take the Inside Out Day challenge with me? I believe Inside Out is a great initiative that asks young people to be kind and think of others more. We don't always know for certain how someone is feeling by just looking at them. We do know that what kindness feels like. Inside Out Day is an annual reminder of this wearing of an item of clothing inside out will really help. Way back when I was 17, social media was yet to be discovered, and we have learned that 16% of children could have a probable mental health issue. We can share the importance of kindness simply by taking an inside out picture. Inside Out Day will be in February in Mental Health Week annually, and I'm going to wear an item of clothing inside out, take my picture and show it on social media and say how important being kind is. We have learned that we don't always know how someone feels inside. Will you join me and share your inside out picture? Together we can improve children's mental health outcomes simply by being kind. Join me February the 2022.
All right. right, thank you, Lorna. Indeed, we need to be kind to each other. We don't know what we're looking at. And going back to today's subject, we need to be kind to each other, but also to the planet, to be environmental friendly, to reduce waste, and to reuse everything we can. So I believe it was very clear that from all our panelists, it's now being also a consumer's choice. 1 in 3 consumers prefer sustainable brands. The travel industry is taking note of this. With this note of being kind to each other and being kind to the planet, I hope you enjoyed today's session. I definitely invite you to come back tomorrow, where we'll be looking at Air Inc. 2020's Mobility Outlook Survey. That's going to be very interesting, and a day hosted by my dear colleague, Alistair Murray. And looking forward to seeing you tomorrow.